WFUZ-TV, Coastal Alabama, Northwest Florida, the People's Voice.
Hello, welcome to WFUZ-TV. I'm Blair, Castro, and I'm here with Thomas Jenkins. Today we have a special guest in the studio, Mr. David J. Maloney, attorney out of Mobile, who covers Mobile, Biloxi area, and all over the Gulf Coast here. He's very well known for his very catchy commercials and his excellent marketing here locally. He's become sort of a local public figure, and we are honored he is here today to talk to us. Thank you for coming.
Well, thanks for the charming introduction.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about, first of all, feel free to give our viewers a little bit of background as to who you are in this area, some of your accomplishments, where you went to school, and what you practice.
I guess maybe what I'll do is I'll start at the very, very beginning, which is when I was 13, we had to read To Kill a Mockingbird for Mrs. Wesselman's English class. And I read it, and then we also had, remember the old days when they would bring in, the AV kid would bring in the TV on the car, and then we watched it. And that even furthered the impression that I was like, okay, that's what I want to do, that's what I want to be. And then my parents, they weren't together, my biological parents weren't together. I was living with my stepfather, and in fact, I was living with my mom and stepfather, and he had adopted me. But I had visitation with my biological father, and we were on our way. I want to say we were on the New York State Thruway near the Ram Post Service area, and I told him, I said, by the way, I think I know what I want to do. When I grow up, I want to be a lawyer. And I found out that that's what he had always wanted to be. But when I was born, it kind of derailed that. Mm-hmm. So that solidified it more. So I decided that's what I wanted to do. But also, while I was in high school, I learned that I had a talent for art, drawing, painting, and things like that. And so I said, you know what I'm going to do? My father was living in Rochester, New York. I grew up with my mom and stepfather. I wanted to be able to be a little closer to him. Mm-hmm. So I applied for college at RIT, got in as a photo major, transferred to graphic design. And my whole pitch was going to be, well, I'll go into copyright law. I'll know graphic design. I'll know this. I'll know that. That was kind of the pitch. I still honestly thought I'd probably end up going into something like criminal defense, because that's what I saw from To Kill a Mockingbird, and I was under this impression that there were so many more people that were in that position than there really are. And so I went into it with these ideals. And then when I then went to law school, I see everybody goes to law school, they're very idealistic. Every person their first year, every kid their first year of law school goes in very idealistic. Once you get out, or as you do clerkships and as you learn more, you realize, okay, sausage is made in a way sometimes you don't want to know how it's made. Yeah. And then I said, okay, well, maybe I don't want to be doing criminal defense. Not knocking the guys who do, but that wasn't where it was. I knew I still wanted to represent the underdog. Mm. And so with doing what I do with personal injury, you're dealing with big insurance companies. You're dealing with individuals going up against entities that have unlimited money and that can drag things out, have unlimited time, whereas the people who are injured may have bills piling up, may be out of work, may have pressure, time pressure to get something resolved. So you really are dealing with a force that has so much more, that is so, there's such a disparity of bargaining position there that they need that representation. And that's why I ended up going into doing what I do with personal injury.
That is interesting to me because my trajectory is somewhat similar. Also, I love To Kill a Mockingbird, and the classic Gregory Peck film cannot be topped. It's just excellent. I think it kind of inspired all of us at one point. But I wanted to go to law school. I was 17, just turned 18. I was a witness in a homicide trial. And it was a big firm in Pensacola represented the murderer, and I wanted to be a prosecutor because I was very convicted about, like, oh, this is terrible, I want to put this bad guy away. Ended up doing criminal defense out of law school, the opposite of what I thought I would do. As you said, like, you go in with one set of ideals and you totally turn. And then similar in a different kind of setting. I went back to get a master's in entertainment business because I was like, what about copyright? What about IP? And then I was like, oh, I'm not taking the patent bar. Like, that's terrible.
Yeah, totally different exam.
No, that was way too hard. And my, I kicked in. I was like, what about marketing for attorneys? What about like marketing for politicians and people that know the law and are drafting it? And then I got into like public policy and like helping county commissioners draft ordinances and local municipality type government law. And then now I teach law at Pensacola State. I teach undergrad law, con law and business law. So it was really an interesting path. But the marketing skills, you're unique in a way, and I think you really stand out with other attorneys in this area because a lot of lawyers are more old school and they don't realize how important it is to market yourself, especially with the huge like swath of lawyers in this area. So what advice would you give people in terms of marketing any like niche, really not have to be attorneys, but how do you stand out in a sea of others that are all saying they do the same thing?
Okay, there's a lot to unwrap there. Okay. So when I first started out, advertising in this area was frowned upon. This was a very conservative, still is a very conservative area. And if you advertised, you might get clients, but there were certain established firms that you'd be kind of rubbing the wrong way. And at the time, a lot of the judges didn't respect a lawyer who advertised. For the longest time, advertising was something that was ethically prohibited by the bar.
Really?
There was a period of time where you could only do certain things. You could hang your shingle up, you could put your sign up, and you could do certain things, but you couldn't formally advertise. Or you could put a business card somewhere. You could do certain things, but you couldn't actively do that. As different law firms in different, more, for lack of a better way of putting it, more liberal areas or bigger cities started doing the advertising and challenging their state bars on these issues, what you found was you had First Amendment rights. So you had this conflict of the bar trying to police its own to maintain a certain level of respect and integrity within the profession, whilst you had some people's First Amendment rights to be able to market themselves. And there's still a lot of ethical guidelines for what lawyers can and can't say in their commercials. And they just went through a whole new round that are going to take place on January 1st, where they're going to start tightening the reins a little bit on some of the things that are being done in Alabama right now. But I was one of the first. I'm not going to claim to be the first on the Gulf Coast in Mobile, but I was one of the first. And my ads were so much different. And because of the fact that it was so conservative at the time, one of the things that I did was my first ads were just words on a screen. The screen would, you'd be watching the TV, and like the end of The Sopranos, it would just go black. And you go, like, did my cable just go out? Because this was like 2000, before streaming on, you go, my cable just went out. And then these words would come up that say you're home again watching television, and then it would fade to black. And it would say, because you were, in an accident, you were hurt. And then it would say it wasn't your fault. Bills may be piling up. You need treatment, and you hurt. And then an insurance company has insulted your injuries. Who do you call? And then my name would be totally silent, but the words would come up and it would force you to go like this and read it. And I had 2 or 3 ads that were of that same kind of approach. And I ran those from when I opened my office in Mobile on June 26th of 2000 till September 11th. And on September 11th, if you remember, on September 11th, everybody stopped advertising for like 2 weeks because it seemed like 24-hour news, whether it was a 24-hour news network, even your normal programming was 24 hours.
Breaking news.
About everything. And nobody ran commercials because nobody wanted to look like they were trying to profit off of this tragedy.
Yeah.
And so for like 2 weeks, nobody ran like a television commercial. And then there were like 5 or 6 advertisers who started advertising about the 10-day to 2-week point. And it was like, Coca-Cola, Nike, McDonald's, the big ones.
Yeah.
And Budweiser. And all of their commercials were just words. It just was silent. They didn't play any music because they didn't want to look like they were trying to evoke emotions. Right. They were playing people's emotions. They didn't show any scenery. It was just words. And then suddenly, something that was my own original concept that I had done for a year and 3 months was no longer looking original because it looked like all the big companies had come up with this idea of doing this.
Yeah.
And I'll be very frank, part of the reason why I didn't put myself in the commercials initially, part of it was the conservatism of the area. Part of it was it would keep me under the radar because nobody would think that these things were working, but they were. And the other part of it was, I had come down from going to school, going to college in New York. I had, I had a little bit of the New York thing going on, and I didn't feel like it was at that point going to go over real well in a Southern market. I'd be not just a Yankee, a damn Yankee. And so I thought, okay, this is the way to do it. But after September 11th, it forced me to have to start doing commercials with me. And the way we handled the very first ones with me in them was I didn't want to come across as being scripted. And I hadn't developed any of the on-camera skill set that I now have worked on hard for a long time, for the past, probably, ever since, we started doing, at October, probably around October 1st of 2001 is when I started going in front of a camera for the first time. So we're talking, 24 years of me working hard at learning kind of this additional craft, if you will.
Sure. And
so I didn't want to look scripted. So what I did was real simple. I just said, asked me, I had somebody come up with 30 questions, told them to surprise me, and I was going to try to answer them in 26 seconds or less, which gives you a 30-second commercial because you've got your 26 seconds and then you have your 4 seconds of tag, which is your slate comes up with your name and your phone number and then the slogan. And, the slogan was, I'll personally return your call. And why? Because that's the number one complaint people have with their lawyers. I can't get him or her to return my call. So I knew.
Still to this day,
I log in, probably I'm on the phone 5-6 hours a day, probably 9,000 to 10,000 minutes a month on myself.
It's also the number one complaint for politicians and government officials. They also won't return your calls, so it's good to be honest. Yes, I do.
Oh, well.
So you were talking about ethical points with advertising for lawyers. Is there different rules of engagement online versus television? Or was that not around in the early 2000s versus now? Or do you find that, because I've seen some lawyers advertisement, they just, there's some that say, shut the F up, and talking about marijuana arrests.
Yeah, well, in the criminal context, I know which ones you're talking about. And, well, it's interesting because there's television advertising, and then there's also disclaimers you have to put in certain things, and certain things qualify as advertising, certain things don't. For example, I can sponsor certain things, and that may or may not be considered advertising. Mm-hmm. I can talk about things. My weekly show, the show that I do, the weekly show with David J. Maloney, plug, that is not advertising because it has absolutely nothing to do with my law practice. I don't give legal advice during the show. I interview people because it's something, one, that I enjoy doing, but two, because it also gives me a cool way to meet a lot of my heroes, and I have a different approach with the show in that I start, most of the time with a lot of talk shows, it's about fluff. It is somebody's promoting something, somebody's plugging something. They're on a show for 4 to 8 minutes, and it's what's going on with you, this, a couple funny little things, maybe they do a skit with Kimmel or whatever, and they show a clip and they're gone.
Yeah.
start at the beginning, kind of like you did today. I start at the beginning. Where did all this start for you? And it also takes some of these people who are really, in some cases, big names, and they'll, Oscar winners I just this past week had George Chakiris on. George, if you don't recognize the name, he's an Oscar and Golden Globe winner. He played Bernardo in West Side Story, the original West Side Story, in 61, 62. And one of the things I like about interviewing, folks like that is some of them are getting up there in age, and they're still relevant to a lot of people. They're just not treated as relevant because it's been a while. And I may be, one of the last people who interviews them. You know what I mean? And they're all some of the folks from that golden era of Hollywood. Mm-hmm. They're honestly, they used to be, get the best table in the best restaurant. They used to be showered. They used to be all this stuff, and they just so appreciative now to have a little taste of that back again. Yeah. It's really kind of cool, and to hear the stories and learn things about that golden era is cool. But that's not just who I have. I've had a lot of musicians, and I've had a lot of current people too. But of late, I've taken kind of an interest in that a little more. Yeah, so we've kind of picked up some more of those shows. But back to your question about advertising, there are different rules for different things, and if it's your own personal thing, you can get away with a lot more without it. If it's not doesn't have the link to your, to your firm's website, or to click here to call or whatever, then you're entitled to your opinion just like any other citizen. So sometimes sometimes it qualifies as advertising, sometimes it doesn't. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's a thin line. You're right. Yeah. So
I love that you have the legends, if you will, on, because I was just thinking about that today. They have so much stories and wisdom, and we really don't appreciate it enough. And then you don't really know what you have till it's gone. And lately, it seems like we've been losing a lot of legends in all kinds of different spaces, and that it's so important. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I mean, no, we just lost Robert Redford, right? And there have been some really, really cool people, and I've got some certain people on my list that I really, really, really want, and I've managed to have two of them on so far. The people that I really, really, were kind of, big deals to me. Mm-hmm. But I've had a lot of other people. One of the cooler things that I enjoyed was I had Harry Chapin's brother, Tom Chapin, on. And Harry Chapin, Cats in the Cradle, right? Tom Chapin is, he is a multiple Grammy Award-winning artist in his own right. And he sounds a lot like his brother. And he did something really kind for me at the end of the show. We were done with the show. And I said, will you do me a favor? Because I sing myself. And I was like, this was by Zoom. I'm like, will you do a duet with me of Cats in the Cradle for my son? And we did it.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it ended up being really, really kind of cool. And he was so gracious to do it. He didn't have to do it. Yeah. And that was kind of a cool, I still kind of get a little chill about it because, really cool. It was really enjoyable. So, and sometimes I'll have just like we'll talk a few minutes after this, like an after interview kind of chat. And you sometimes, when the cameras aren't rolling, you get to know somebody in a completely different way, which is even more, which I appreciate even more sometimes in the actual interviews.
I actually met you before at Hub Stations. You would sing karaoke there, and you have a great voice.
Back in the day. I appreciate that. That was way back in the day.
Yes. I wanted to ask a little bit about your Super Bowl commercials in particular. Sure. They are hilarious. Everybody loves them. It's sort of like a local pastime. We eagerly await every year to see what you're going to come out with. How do you come up with these ideas, and what's some of your favorite ones? And I guess another follow-up to that string would be, how do you keep topping it? It feels like I would just max myself out on ideas with creativity there.
After we did the Godfather of Personal Injury ad, it was really, I was like, how am I ever going to top this? That one we did, that one aired in 2000, just before the pandemic. And You can go online and you can not just see the ad, but there's a comparison video we did where you can see how close we got to the actual movie. And it's so much more difficult, by the way, to do a parody than it is to just do new original content. Because original content, you can shoot what we're shooting right now, and nobody knows that the mug is supposed to be here, or here, or here. But if you're shooting a parody, and the mug on the table is here, it has to be here, and it has to be turned just the way it was in the movie, and the light has to hit it just the right way, and the light has to hit you just the right way, and the background has to be just the right way, and your jacket needs to be, if it was off kilter. I remember when we were shooting there was the one scene where I turned to my partner who's kind of playing the Robert Duvall character, and I go, I've decided to become a godfather of personal injury, which is taken from the funeral scene with Michael Corleone and Robert Duvall playing, his character, and his tie was up and tilted at a weird angle and came back for some reason, and we kept moving that. And then another one is in that Godfather scene where they kick the door in to frankly gun down the one guy with his mistress in bed. We flipped that around and we made it flow with a guy in bed, flow from progressive with a guy in bed, and they kicked the door down. Well, we had to make I'm looking at your door there, but I guess we'll look at the door back here. We had to make the door frame, break the exact same way. Mm-hmm. So we had to break it in the same place. We had to put Velcro behind it. We had to put a little chain behind it, and we had to have a way so that it would be, when it would be kicked, it would break in a similar way. And we did like 20 takes because
I asked how many test breaks were there.
It didn't always do it in the exact same way. Mm-hmm. But we got like 2 where it broke similar enough. So when you look at the video, it does that. And it was so funny because after it was done, somebody said to me at one point, they said, well, what are you going to do if you get a cease and desist from the producers, from Godfather folks,
it's a compliment, right?
That was exactly it. They were like, if, not Mario Puzo, but, trying to think of his name, the director now. This should come to me. It's one of my favorite movies. But if, Francis Ford Coppola, they're like, if you get a cease and desist from Francis Ford Coppola, what are you going to do? I'm like, I'm going to frame it, and so, that's probably, in my opinion, the highest quality one we've done. It's probably one of my favorites. Another one is the Ferris Bueller parody. Mm-hmm. And that one we also have a comparison video. And that one we got as close as we could. Obviously, I wasn't going to do the big parade thing, where he's on the float, singing, a Beatles song, but we did do me throwing, because we're in Mobile, we did a Mardi Gras parade float instead, which makes sense. But I mean, we even did the running scene where I run behind and my partner's driving the car instead. And then when we won the Nappy Award for it, we did a Nappy acceptance speech, which was a further parody of the movie, where I do the acceptance speech like when Ferris is talking to the camera, and at the beginning where he's talking about, if I miss another day of school, I'm going to have to cough up a lung or something. And the whole shower scene where he sings Danke Shane. Mm-hmm. And we did that. And then if you look up the long version, there's an extended cut of the Dave G. Maloney's Day Off ad, where it has the credits and the ending part of it. And we redo the bus scene from the end of the movie but instead of the principal, it's Flo. And it even has the, gummy bear. It's been in my pocket. It's warm and soft. It even has the same thing. To be honest, I think that's equally as funny as the ad itself. The ending, this extra thing we did, this bonus clip. But yeah, so they're really fun to do. They all start in my noggin. They come to you at different times. It is tough to top each one. Last year, I was having writer's block, for lack of a better way of putting it, until normally we have an idea in July, August. We start doing storyboards for it in September. We start getting things scheduled in late October, November. We start shooting November, December, January, because it has to be turned in because the Super Bowl is the first week of February usually. And last year, it was the end of October, and I still didn't have a solid idea yet. I then came up with, I had some ideas of some movies I wanted to parody, but none of them were fully cooked. And then I had one that I'm like, okay, I have a full script from start to finish, but it's so ambitious, and it's going to require so much costuming and so much, I guess, special effects. I'm not going to say what movie it is, but we're taking on a massive thing, and we were going to take it on, and there wasn't enough time to pull it off. And then I was watching something on TV, and there was a clip of a movie, a Michael Keaton movie called Duplicity from years and years ago, where he cloned himself. And so that he could get all this work done. But every version, every copy that he made, subsequent copy, was a weaker, more diluted, less intelligent version of himself. And of course, then, havoc and amusement ensues. And so I thought, that goes with the how do I return everybody's call. So I came up with the clones idea. I called the production guy and I said, look, we were talking about such and such movie. There's not enough time to pull that off. I don't think. Here's my other idea. And I told the idea. And he started laughing. And generally, when he starts laughing, I know that's it. I then ran it by a few other people with the general idea. We were like, okay, now the question is how do we do it? How do we make the clones? And so we started researching that. And we found that there was different cameras, different things we could do. We had to buy certain special equipment, like for the scene when I walk through my own office, and so we had to shoot that with me sitting like behind a desk like this with me, but the camera that was where this camera's here was on a moving dolly that would move this way and spin. It would start and then it would spin. Well, it would start, it would pivot over, it would start on me, it would pivot over, pick up the door on that would be on that side, work its way around, and then work its way all the way around because I have a conference room over there. So I was going to have me being the original me with just a shirt on, talking directly to the camera, and then another version of me would come in the suit from there, high five myself, keep walking. I'd have to follow myself this way. So I'd have to say my line, look over there, imagine myself walking this way, high five in an area that I would have to hit exactly myself later in a later shoot in midair. Keep going, follow myself there, and then the other one would pick up there. The other clone would pick up there. And we did about 12 takes. We didn't know if any of them worked because we had to shoot it, and I'd say, there was, how does Dave G. Maloney return everyone's call? And I'd go, clone it. And then you'd see the music, and then there would be other scenes, and then I would say, and I'd have another line, and then I would put my hand up. I'd say the line, I'd look over and see the other one walking, and the other one walking would say, just settled another case, got every penny our client wanted. And I would put up my hand. So I have to make sure that I had in my head what I was saying, so my timing would be right, and it was all while the camera was moving, and it had a metronome that would go tick, tick, tick. So you'd know how many ticks. And then I'd have to put up my hand, and we did a whole bunch. Where I'd put up my hand, I'd go like this, look at the person going like this, put up my hand like I'm looking at them, and then I'd go like this, like they kept walk by, and then I'd follow. And then we got a dozen of those, and then we'd shoot a dozen of me walking in, and I'd have to walk in, and I'd have to go like this, but I'd have to pop my hand just right in the exact spot in space.
Right.
So it could have been off here, 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 here. But it would have to be just right. So I have to remember exactly where it was in space in the middle of a room. And we got like 2 or 3 that were usable. And that's kind of how we did that. So, but, and that has 4 different endings. So every time you see it, it's different. So that's kind of a fun thing there. We've done that a few times where there's a few ads that, the bigger isn't better ad. Just 4 different endings to that one too.
So it's safe to say you're a film buff as well.
Yeah, there's a part of me now that feels like I missed a little calling. I look for any opportunity I can to be in anything. So if I'm invited to be in something, I've done music videos, I've done all kinds of things where I'm invited. Sometimes it's to be acting in a role as someone else. Sometimes it's a cameo. Sometimes it's, I was in, Sarah Evans had a big hit a few years ago called Cheatin'. And I I'll use the word essentially play myself in it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So.
Speaking of the bigger is better ad, that's hilarious to me because one of the competitors there is someone I had worked with when I went to law school in Orlando. Not worked with professionally, but worked with in the community doing different things. And I was cracked up. I was like, man, these are getting good.
Well, that goes to the ethical thing. The problem that I had was, one of the Alabama State Bar says that you have to have a disclaimer at the end. And that disclaimer basically says no representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by any other lawyer. And even though it gets said quickly and sometimes sounds like a car dealer disclaimer, does not include tax, title, and center fees. But that's still an ethical rule. And you had this one firm that came out advertising bigger is better. Well, you're not allowed to say you're better. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to say bigger is, in my opinion, bigger is better, because you're saying, well, if you say in one sentence we're the biggest and then you say bigger is better, then you're saying we're better. And you're not allowed to say we're better under the bar rules. You literally have a disclaimer right in your ad that says, I'm not allowed to say this. Mm. And then you say it. And so, and they had this whole size matters campaign things. And so that's why we had a bunch of judgment size matters and all those other things. But the whole idea behind that ad was, no, it doesn't. It's not bigger, isn't necessarily.
The clients definitely should be more than just a number. And even there's even small firms here locally where you never actually get to talk to the attorney either. And that was something I didn't like about practicing, to be honest, because I felt like, oh, am I really making an impact? Am I really able to manage all this time? Am I really able to have the infrastructure to, operate as a solo practitioner or with a group or whatever else? It's difficult. And it's, I guess I commend you on how well you manage being able to interface with the clients as well as like long strategic plans with your marketing and keeping everything under control. I mean, that's a lot of work.
Well, the cloning thing is kind of funny, but the truth of the matter is what it really is it's incredible organization. And it is a certain amount of time management, and it is recognizing that accidents don't happen at convenient times, so therefore I have to be readily available. I don't keep bankers' hours. I'll return calls straight up till 9 p.m. every night, and if it's an emergency, potentially after, unless I'm, asleep, in court, at church, chances are I'm gonna, in the shower, I'm gonna try to return a call, right then and there. I've had times where unfortunately I have to step away from, dinner in a restaurant and walk outside and return somebody's call. Not just because I say I do, but because if it's a new client, sometimes they need that input and that advice right away. And if it's an existing client, when somebody hires a lawyer, I think there's two things they should be getting. Not one of obviously is an end result. And every lawyer is going to tell you they get you an end result. No lawyer is going to go, I suck, don't hire me. We're all going to say, we're great, we're fantastic, we're going to get you a great result. We're all going to say that. Okay? And lawyers, are good at saying stuff. So you're not going to know whether, how much they really mean that. You know what I mean? But they're all going to say they're great. They're all going to say they get you a good result. So you can't just base it based on what they're saying. But the second thing I think that people should be getting is peace of mind. And that peace of mind comes from having somebody who will respond to your questions in a timely manner. Respond to them in a way that's easy to understand, not a bunch of legalese or legal mumbo jumbo. Somebody who's able to lay it out for you and let you know. Somebody who's going to be transparent in telling you the good, the bad, and the ugly. I often say my job isn't to tell you what you want to hear; it's to tell you what you need to know. So you want somebody who's going to tell you what you need to know rather than what you just want to hear at that moment. And that way, the client knows where they stand. They know they can make the best decisions about their case, and they can sleep well at night knowing that they've got the right person on the job. And what I tell people is, if I don't give you that feeling, then hire somebody else, because you're missing out on half of what you're paying for. Half of what you're paying for when you get a lawyer is peace of mind. And that it's not just the professionalism, but it's just knowing that you've got somebody on it who's taking care of things and taking care of you. And so that, and a lot of that, like I said, comes down to being able to answer questions in real time in easy to understand terms.
What do you do to maintain some sort of work-life balance being that available?
Well, so you got quantity, you've got quality, right? So part of it is, I focus also on quality of time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't get a lot of sleep.
Fair enough.
But no, it's a focus on quality time. And there's also times when you can multitask. Like, I've settled cases at Disneyland. I've settled cases, outside my dry cleaner, picking up dry cleaning. I've, guided clients through difficult times, at different places. Like I said, restaurant, I'm at a restaurant. Sorry, I got to go take this. Mm-hmm. And, they call me from the accident scene and they go, I need to know what to do right now. Okay, give me a second. I get up from the table. I excuse myself. 5-10 minutes, I come back. But people understand, the people that are my family, friends, colleagues, they know that. Mm-hmm. If there's certain professions that's what it calls upon you to do. And sometimes people go, oh, well, that's not fair to your family. Well, a couple things about that. One, there are people who are in professions, nurses, doctors. They have to work sometimes crazy hours to provide for their families and to give their families, a better life. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that's what I do. I kind of, maybe, and yeah, you make those compromises. But there are other people who make even greater compromises. You were talking about, before this thing started, we were talking about what you do with the violin. Mm-hmm. And how you do that for the folks in the military and veterans, right? Mm-hmm. And these are people who made incredible sacrifices. They went overseas. They didn't see their family for months at a time, right. Years sometimes, and they're in harm's way. And yeah, it is because they're the service that they provide to our country, but it's also an occupation for putting food on the table for the family back home. Yeah. That's their career choice, and that's what, you know what I mean? And they're making even greater sacrifices, as far as, their families and, what kind of balance do you have there? Yeah. And for the longest time, you have none. But what you're doing is, you're serving the country, and you're also, putting food on the table, maybe putting your kid through college, yeah. Maybe, helping, bringing money into the household for the family member that's sick. You know what I mean? Everybody has a different story. You know what I mean? And it's sometimes it is a little frustrating to me when, we had that commercial we did that was a day in a life where it followed me around. And that came up literally at it was partially my wife's idea. We were at that very island that the end scene is at in that commercial, and we were talking about stuff. And my wife said something like, well, if people just understood how hard you worked. I said, I can show that. And I came up with this idea of the film following me around for a whole day. And I got a lot of people complaining because the scene on the microwave at the end when we're sitting down to have dinner is 8:43. And people are like, they're having dinner at 8:43. Their kids got to be at school the next day. And they're eating so late, and everybody gets all judgmental. Well, I'm going to double down on this now. We actually used graphics to change the time. The actual time on that microwave was 9:43. It was actually an hour later than it really was. Yeah. So for those people who are like, oh, yeah, it was even later than that. But, but there are also many times where, just the other night, I got in late and my wife was like, we're all going to eat. We hope you don't mind. We're going to eat without you. I come home, tray in front of the telly, but I don't mind. I got to catch up on, some shows that I hadn't seen in a bit, and she was already watching a movie with her friend in the other room, and I was good with that, and so because it was a friend she hadn't seen in a while, who's and so I was like, yeah, you enjoy your time with your friend. I'll catch up on one of my what do you call them, the guilty pleasures.
Yeah.
There's certain shows that you'd go, kind of surprised he watches that. It's like, yeah, and they're kind of corny, but yeah. Anyway.
Well, I like that a lot. That you have to make short-term. I consider those short-term sacrifices for the bigger picture sometimes, and it's good to have family that understands that, and the people close to you will recognize that these are just small, really, to me, small sacrifices in your eyes on the bigger picture, and you've got a master plan, if you will. So it's worth it.
Well, also, I'm a firm believer that there's often longer-term rewards given for delayed gratification.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, you can either coast a whole lot now and then the rest of your life climb, or you climb now to the peak and then coast a little bit more on the way back down.
Yeah.
And I chose this path. And other people choose this path, but sometimes you choose this path and you never come back and your life's a struggle. And so that's something I try to embody in my son, try to teach him that, it's, sometimes it's better to delay that immediate gratification. When you're making college choices, you can go to the fun school or you can go to the one that's going to give you the education that's going to set you up for life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you can make connections that will help set you up for life. You can get this, so yeah, you can go to the school where you can go to the football game every Saturday and be part of that fun crowd. Or you can go to, this school where it will help you get into this other school eventually, where you can do what you want to do, and then you can go to football games whenever you want. You know what I mean?
The big ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and if you do well enough, you might even meet some of the players. So
Or have your own Super Bowl commercials.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, there's something about that. But to finish up your question earlier, it all starts kind of in my head, and then I work on it, and it doesn't always come to you. Like, it'll come to you in weird places. Like, I might be in the shower, might be in my car, might be the ambulances chase him thing came about. I was in Pensacola. I was at the doghouse getting a hot dog.
Mm-hmm.
And I was walking in, 'cause it was next door to where I get my hair cut. And I got my hair cut, and I was going in to get a hot dog. And I walk in, and the guy who's running the place there goes, it's kind of sarcastically, chasing the ambulances lately? And my kind of off-the-cuff response was, at this stage in my career, ambulances chase me. And I went, that's good. And so I'm like, give me a napkin. And he'll write it on a napkin thing.
That's how he writes music.
And he was like, yeah, it was like right on a napkin. So I plopped it up, put it on a napkin, and then, it became part of that. We did the Dosecki's parodies, where it's like, he once returned a telemarketer's call because he said he would.
Yeah.
And then there was ambulances chase him. But those were funny. So we try to stay on the humor side with Super Bowl ones. I try to stay on the more serious ones with the non-Super Bowl ones. So,
well, thank you so much for coming here today. I really appreciate your time, and thank your clones as well for all their deals.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me, and thank you so much.
Oh, and tell everybody where they can follow you and where to watch your show.
Okay, so I'll address the show first. The show is The Weekly Show with David G. Maloney. It is on all major streaming platforms, so you can listen to it, or if you want to watch it and see some of your favorite, musicians, actors, actresses, people that, old-timey Hollywood, even current stars, writers, directors, basically it's just like any other talk show. You can go follow us, The Weekly Show on Facebook. You can see clips on Instagram, or YouTube. YouTube is the best way because you can either watch clips, where we have select ones, or you can watch entire episodes in their entirety, or just binge if you so wish. And then as far as the firm, it's MaloneyLines.com, which is, fairly simple.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.